I'm wondering, is there something that you know where others need to know it and you feel compelled to tell them? Have you ever known something and you knew that others needed to know it and you felt compelled to tell them? I'll give you an example. Like I'll be at the gym sometimes and I'll see somebody working out. They're doing a certain exercise and they're doing it wrong. Maybe they're on the pull down machine and they are pulling it down and doing a rep like this. And I'll see that, and I don't do this so much now, but I used to. But I feel compelled to talk to them about what they're doing. And so there are times where I'll go up to somebody and I'll see them doing the pull down like this. You're like, what's wrong with that? That's what I do. I'm going to tell you what's wrong with it. But they're pulling it down, and I'll go up to them and I'll say, hey, what are you trying to work out? I'll say, oh, my back. I'm trying to work out my back and my lats. And I'll say, oh, okay, hey, can I give you some advice that you didn't ask for? And they'll say, okay, sure, yeah, whatever. And then I'll tell them, hey, if you're trying to work out your lats, what you want to do is you want to take it, you just want to pull it down and feel that squeeze in your lats and then bring it back up. You don't need to come down like this because then you're working out your arms and stuff like that. You're not doing heavy enough weight. Just bring it down here, squeeze, and that's it. And they'll say, oh, okay, gotcha. And then I'll walk away, and I feel good because I have now told them something that they needed to know. But sometimes I'll look back over at them, and they're doing this. And it's like, wait, we just talked about this. We had a whole conversation about it, but you didn't change anything. You know, it's up to them if they're going to change anything, if they're going to do anything. But I needed to tell them. Because sometimes, especially in the gym, if I know how an exercise needs to be done and you don't, I need to tell you because you might get hurt. Like if you're arching your back doing a deadlift, you're going to get hurt. If you're doing a movement wrong, you could get hurt. So it's a matter of life and death sometimes, or a matter of injury, right? And so there's sometimes where we know something and others don't know it, but they need to know it. Like maybe you have some inside information that the meeting is canceled, and you need to tell some other people that the meeting is canceled. If you don't tell other people that the meeting is canceled, they're just going to show up and wait around, and nothing's going to happen. There's times where we know some information, and we have to share it with other people. I'll give you a perfect example, especially around this sermon. So we had a creative planning session where we talked about this series and we talked about Easter. There was a group of us in me and Irene's living room, and we're planning out how do we creatively convey the messages for this series and also for Easter. And we got to this message right here. So I got up, I went to the bathroom, everybody was talking, and then I came back and they were talking about a movie clip that we could show in the beginning of this message. And I forget the movie they were talking about, but I came in, I heard them talking about it, and I said, oh, guys, what are you doing? Well, I already have a movie clip. Like, we're already going to show a movie clip. I already have it. It's downloaded. It's in the message. It's done. And that would have been good information for them to know before I went to the bathroom, because they just spent 5 minutes talking about showing this. I didn't spend 5 minutes in the bathroom. I was washing my hands. That's what I was doing. But it would have been good for them to know that before I went to the bathroom. That way they wouldn't have spent 5 minutes talking about this movie clip that we weren't even going to show, because the movie clip I want to show you is from the movie 1917. 1917 is a movie that released in 2019, and it's a 2-shot film that recalls a fictional event that took place on April 6, 1917, which was created after being pieced together from fragments of real events. And so in the movie, what happens is aerial reconnaissance observed that the Imperial German army pulled back from a sector of the Western Front in northern France during World War I. But this wasn't a retreat. See, they thought it was a retreat, but the German army wasn't retreating. It was a strategic withdrawal to the new Hindenburg line, where the Germans awaited to overwhelm the British with artillery. And so in the British trenches, with field telephone lines cut, 2 young British lance corporals, William Schofield, a veteran of the Somme, and Tom Blake, were ordered by General Aaronmore to carry a message to Colonel Mackenzie of the 2nd Battalion of the Devonshire Regiment. The message was to call off the scheduled attack for the next morning, because if they attacked, it would jeopardize the lives of 1,600 men, including Blake's brother Joseph. So Schofield and Blake had vital information that needed to be passed on in order to save lives. They knew something that the men on the front lines didn't know. And those who didn't know what Schofield and Blake knew needed to know, because if they didn't know that there was a surprise attack just beyond the trenches, then they'd be killed. And so Schofield and Blake went on this journey to share this vital information with these troops. And Blake had even greater incentive to pass this message on because his brother Joseph was at risk of being killed without this information. His brother was on the front lines. However, throughout their journey to pass on this information, Blake was killed, leaving Schofield, who didn't have as much incentive. His brother wasn't on the front lines, but he was left with the burden of passing on this information. And as he reaches his final destination, he gets there to the front lines. He's right there in the trenches. This is the last leg of the journey to get the message to Colonel Mackenzie.
Where is Colonel Mackenzie?
He's further up the line.
How far?
300 yards. He's in a cut and cover. You'll have to wait until the first wave goes over.
No, I can't.
Seven platoon, 30 seconds. You can't possibly make it that way, man. You bloody insane. What the hell are you doing, Lance Corporal? No, 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 no!
Mackenzie! Is he there? Let me through! Let me through! I want to get through! I have to see Colonel Mackenzie! I have to stop this attack!
Colonel, we've seen flares. The men on the left flank have made it to the German line.
Colonel! Hold him! Colonel! Listen to me! Listen to me! I have a letter! I need to see Colonel Mackenzie! There's no bloody way you're getting in there, mate!
Sergeant, send the next wave!
No!
Second wave! Prepare yourself!
Yeah, so Schofield knew something that others needed to know, and he had to pass on what he knew because it was a matter of life and death. And 2,900 years ago, there were these four guys who were sentenced to a death sentence, and they discovered something. And they had a choice on what they would do with what they discovered. If they would share it with others or keep it to themselves. And the information that they had, what they knew, was a matter of life and death for the people who didn't know. And these four guys who were sentenced to this death sentence ultimately came to the conclusion of the title for my sermon. I want to invite you to take a moment to write this down. If you're taking notes, if not, I want to invite you to take a moment to write this down. Here's the title for my sermon. This is the conclusion that these four guys came to. They said, if we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. This is the title for my sermon. If we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. And I want to show you what happened 2,900 years ago with these four guys who knew this information. But this sermon, this topic, this event that took place 2,900 years ago is actually one that I preached on 2 years ago at one of our sneak peek services. Our very first service here as a church, I preached on this same event. And the title for that message, if you want to go back and listen to it on our podcast or search for it on our website, The title for that message was, If We Go Back There, We'll Die. If we stay here, we'll die. If we go there, we might die, but we might live. I think that's probably the longest sermon title I've ever used. So you can go back and listen to what I talked about then, but today I want to talk about that same event, but from a different aspect. And so these four guys, they came to this conclusion. If we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. So 2,900 years ago, there was this moment where these guys knew this information and they decided that they had to pass it on to others. But before I take you back to 2,900 years ago, let's go back 500 years prior to that, to 3,400 years ago. And here's what's happened, because this kind of sets the scene for what we see with these four guys. So the nation of Israel were slaves in Egypt. And this guy Moses rises up to be their leader, and he leads them out of Egyptian captivity. They're no longer slaves anymore, and he's leading them through the wilderness to this land that's going to be theirs. It's their promised land. God has set this land aside for them to inherit, to go in and live in. But the problem is there are people already living there. And so they have to go into this land and they have to drive these people out. So the Israelites, about 1 million people, led by Moses, come right up to the edge of the promised land. They send some spies in to check out the land and see how it is. And the spies come back, 2 of them give a favorable report. They say, oh, the land is great, we should take it, it's amazing. But there's 10 of those spies who come back and they say, there's no way we can do it. The people there are mean, they're scary, they're big, there's no way we can take them. So the people of Israel rebel against Moses and against the plan God has for them, and they say, we're not going into the land. And so God says, fine, if you don't want to go into the land, then you're just going to wander around the wilderness for 40 years until all of you die. And then when your children get old enough and they have some cojones with some courage, then they'll be the ones to go in and get the land. And so that's what happens. They wander around the wilderness for 40 years pass. And then Moses brings the people of Israel right up to the edge of the promised land for take 2. And just before they go into the land to take the land, Moses gives them several speeches that are recorded in the book of Deuteronomy. It's the 5th book in the Old Testament. And here's essentially what he says in these speeches. He says, all right, hey guys, listen. When you go into the land God has set aside for you, make sure to follow God. Make sure to do all the things that he says to do, because if you do what he says to do, if you follow him, then things will go well with you. But here's the deal. I know you guys. I spent the past 40 years with you, and I know when you go into the land, you're not going to follow God. You're going to rebel against him. You're going to do whatever you want to do. So let me tell you what's going to happen when you do that. So he gives them this speech. He's like, hey, make sure you follow God, but I know you're not going to. So here's what's going to happen when you rebel against God. And he gives them all these consequences, all these things that are going to take place. And one of the things he says is that nations are going to come in and they're going to surround you. They're going to set up siege against your cities and starve you to death. When an army would set up siege, what they would do is they would camp outside of a city and make it so that no goods could come and go from that city. So a siege lasted for a long time, sometimes years, where the army is just camping out in front of the city, and the people inside the city are essentially starved into submission. And they say, okay, we give up, we quit, and then the army takes over the city. And so Moses says, when you rebel against God, one of the things that's going to happen is nations are going to come in, they're going to set up siege against your cities, and here's how bad it's going to be. He said, the siege and terrible distress of the enemy's attack will be so severe that you will eat the flesh of your own sons and daughters whom the Lord your God has given you. If you rebel against God, armies are going to come in, they're going to set up siege. It's going to be so bad, they're going to starve you into submission. You're going to eat your own sons and daughters. The most tender-hearted man among you will have no compassion for his own brother, his beloved wife, and his surviving children. He will refuse to share with them the flesh he is devouring, the flesh of his one and only of one of his own children, because he has nothing else to eat during the siege and terrible distress that your enemy will inflict on all your towns. Hey, if you rebel against God, nations are going to come in, they're going to set up siege against you, and the most tender and delicate woman among you, so delicate she would not so much as touch the ground with her foot, will be selfish toward the husband she loves, and toward her own son or daughter. She will hide from them the afterbirth and the new baby she has born, so that she herself can secretly eat them. She will have nothing else to eat during the siege and terrible distress that your enemy will inflict on all your towns. So Moses warns the people of Israel, hey, if you rebel against God, and I know you will, things are not going to go well for you. And nations are going to come in, they're going to set up siege, and you're going to be starving so much that you're going to be willing to eat your own children. You're going to be so selfish that you're not going to share the flesh of your children with the people that you love. I mean, this is depravity. This is bad. And then 500 years later, this is exactly what happens. And this takes us to this moment that took place 2,900 years ago with these four guys. But before we look at these four guys, I want to help you see what's here's what's happened. Israel has rebelled against God. A nation, the Arameans have come. They've set up siege against the city of Samaria. And this is where we pick up 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 24. Sometime later, however, King Ben-Hadad of Aram mustered his entire army and besieged Samaria. As a result, there was a great famine in the city, and the siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 pieces of silver and a cup of dove's dung sold for 5 pieces of silver. One day as the king of Israel was walking along the wall of the city, a woman called to him, "Please help me, my lord the king." And he answered, "If the Lord doesn't help you, what can I do? I have neither food from the threshing floor nor wine from the press to give you. I don't have anything I can do to help you, but I'll try." So the king asked, "Well, what's the matter?" The woman replied, "This woman said to me, 'Come, let's eat your son today, and then we'll eat my son tomorrow.' So here's what we did. We cooked my son and ate him. Then the next day I said to her, 'Kill your son so we can eat him,' but she's hidden her son." The things Moses warned the people of Israel about 500 years prior are taking place here and now in the city of Samaria. They're under siege, and the people are starving to death. They're so desperate, they're paying a fortune to eat a donkey head. These people are so bad off that they're spending money, they're paying money so they can eat bird poop. They're so bad off that they're killing their kids and eating them. And then we zoom out from the city, we go right to the city gates, just on the outside of the wall of this city, 2 Kings 7:3. Now, there were 4 men with leprosy sitting at the entrance of the city gates. "Why should we sit here waiting to die?" they asked each other. "We'll starve if we stay here, but with the famine in the city, we'll starve if we go back there. So we might as well go out and surrender to the Aramean army. If they let us live, so much the better, but if they kill us, we would have died anyway." You see where the title came from? If we go back there, we'll die. If we stay here, we'll die. But if we go there, we might die, but we also might live. That's what they say right here. The famine's in the city. We're going to die in there. We got no food here at the city gate. But if we go to the Arameans, maybe they'll spare our lives, or maybe they'll kill us. Either way, that's our best shot. So at twilight, they set out for the camp of the Arameans. But when they came to the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Aramean army to hear the clatter of speeding chariots and the galloping of horses and the sounds of a great army approaching. "The king of Israel has hired the Hittites and Egyptians to attack us," they cried to one another. So they panicked and ran into the night, abandoning their tents, horses, donkeys, and everything else as they fled for their lives. And when the men with leprosy arrived at the edge of the camp, they went into one tent after another, eating and drinking wine, and they carried off silver and gold and clothing and hid it. So these 4 skin-infected guys come to the conclusion, if we stay where we are, we're going to die. If we go into the city, we're going to die. But if we go out to the Arameans, we might die. They might kill us, but they might also let us live. And so they make their way to the Aramean camp, and on their way to the Aramean camp, God makes their footsteps sound like an army. And the Arameans are so freaked out about it that they run, they hide, or they leave the camp, they leave their tents, they leave everything behind. And so these 4 lepers, these guys with the skin disease, this death sentence really, show up to this empty camp, and there's food galore. There's wine flowing. There's gold, silver, clothes, all this stuff. These guys show up, and there is, like, they hit the Am I really loud? I feel like I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. They show up, and it's like they hit the jackpot. Like, sorry, I got thrown off. They hit the jackpot. There's all this food. There's this wine. There's the clothes, gold, all this stuff, and then they have like this scarcity mentality, right? It's like, oh my goodness, there's all this food. There's all this stuff to drink. There's all these riches, and they start hiding it. They start devouring the food. They start like hoarding it for themselves. I mean, they have hit the jackpot. They're throwing a party, but then there's this moment where they remember all the people in the city. All the people in the city who are starving, who are killing their kids and eating them, who are struggling. And so here's the two different scenes. These four guys have stumbled upon something great and amazing. They've hit the jackpot. They hit the lottery. But then in the city, there are all these people who are dying, who need what these guys have just found. And then there's this moment where clarity hits them, and they realize the situation that they find themselves in. And it says this, finally, they said to each other, this is not right. This isn't right. This is a day of good news, and we aren't sharing it with anyone. If we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. Come, let's go back and tell the people at the palace. So they went back to the city and they told the gatekeepers what had happened. We went out to the Aramean camp, they said, and no one was there. The horses, the donkeys were tethered and the tents were all in order, but there wasn't a single person around. And then the gatekeeper shouted the news to the people of the palace. And so what's the scene that we see here? In the city, there's death. And there's starvation, and there's poverty. People are perishing in the city. And then, the opposite of that is these four guys have stumbled upon the answer that the people in the city need. They've stumbled upon this camp that's filled with food and wine and riches, and that's the answer that the people in the city need. That's the solution to the problem that people in the city have. And so they say, we can't keep what we have to ourselves. We found life, and there's death in the city. We found food, and there's hunger in the city. We found hope, because now we're going to live, and they don't have any hope in the city. This isn't right. We got to share what we found with them. And if we don't share what we have with them, then certainly some calamity will fall on us. How many of you know this sermon is not about some event that took place 2,900 years ago with four guys in a city, but this sermon is about us here and now. Because here's the truth. You and I have some good news. You and I have found some hope. And the good news that we have is the gospel of God. If you ever wondered what the gospel is, here it is right here. We see it in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 1. It says, let me now remind you, dear brothers and sisters, of the good news I preached to you before. You welcomed it then, and you still stand firm in it. It's the good news that saves you if you continue to believe the message I told you. Unless, of course, you believe something that was never true in the first place. I pass on to you what was most important and what had also been passed on to me. And here's the good news. Here's the good news that Christ, this is the gospel, that Christ died for our sins, just as the scriptures said. He was buried and he was raised from the dead on the third day, just as the scriptures said. And so if anyone ever asks you, hey, what is the gospel? Or you wonder, what is the gospel? The definition of the gospel is right here in 1 Corinthians 15. It says that Jesus, the Son of God, God himself, died on the cross in your place. That Christ died, he was buried, and he rose again on the third day. And that's what we're going to celebrate on Easter, is the resurrection of Jesus. But this is the good news that you and I have. But we're just like those four lepers. Because we know some people who don't have that good news. We have hope, but we know some people who don't have hope. We have light, but we know some people who are wandering around in the darkness. We have life, but we know some people who are living in the valley of the shadow of death. And the question that I have for you is, are you sharing that good news with the people in your life who need it? Finally, they said to each other, this is not right. This is a day of good news, and we aren't sharing it with anyone. If we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. Who in your life needs to know about the good news that you have? Who in your life needs to know that there's a God who loves them, calls them by name, has a plan and a purpose for their life? And you know that. You know it. You know it. But you hadn't shared it with them yet. This isn't right. This isn't right. This is a day of good news, but we aren't sharing it with anybody. If we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. Who needs to know what you know, but they don't know because you hadn't told them? This isn't right. D.T. Niles said evangelism is just one beggar telling another where to find bread. Evangelism is just one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. You know some beggars, don't you? You know some people who need some hope, who need life, who need some direction, who need to know that they're loved. You know them, right? As somebody who has found bread yourself, my question is, will you tell the other beggars in your life where to find bread? Will you tell them to be here next week for Easter? Or will you keep it to yourself? You and I, we know some beggars. We work with them. We get drinks with them on Fridays. You sit with them in the same cubicle farm or open office concept, whatever you have. You know some beggars, don't you? You comment on their photos. You like their posts. You see them at your kid's scout troop, basketball game, wrestling match, birthday. You know some beggars. You bump into them all the time. They're all the people in your life. You know some people who are desperately searching for some bread to feed their failing marriage, to give direction to their aimless life, to provide meaning to their existence. You know some people who need what you got. You know some beggars who are just stumbling around in the darkness. They're trying to find their way. You know some beggars who don't know something that you know, and it's that Jesus is the bread of life. Jesus is the light in the darkness. Jesus died for their sins. He was buried, and He raised from the dead 3 days later. And if they would just believe that, follow, and be immersed into Him, then they would find life like you found life. They would find hope like you found hope. They would know the light like you know the light. If they would only know what you knew. But for them to know, you gotta tell them. So I wonder, what are you gonna do? You are one of those lepers. You stumbled upon the treasure. You found what you need. There's a whole world out there dying. There's a whole workplace out there lost. This isn't right. This isn't right. This is a day of good news. And we're not telling anybody. If we wait till tomorrow, certainly some calamity will fall upon us. God, I pray you convict us. Give us that same conviction that the 4 lepers had. And we know some people who need hope, but we're too scared to say something. We know some people who need life, but we're too embarrassed to extend an invite. We know some people who need purpose, but we're too anxious to step outside our comfort zone and say something. God, give us the same conviction. Give us the same courage, urgency. Say, we can't wait another day. If we wait till morning and I withhold this information from people who need to know it, oh man, some calamity is going to befall me. I can't. God, convict us. Convict us to share what we got. We can't keep it to ourselves. In Jesus' name. Next week is Easter. Studies tell us that 8 out of 10 people will respond positively to an invitation to church if somebody just asks them. And Easter is a time where if somebody doesn't go to church, they are more likely to go to church. So this week, you got an opportunity to share what you got. You got an opportunity to share the good news. You know some stuff that some other people need to know, and if you'll just share it with them this week, chances are they'll say yes and they'll show up next week. And they'll learn that who they were is not who they have to be. They'll come next week and they'll discover that because of the power of the resurrection, they can be raised to new life as well. But they're not going to be here unless you say something. Man, the power of an invite is so huge. It's so tremendous. I want to show you the power of an invite. So we started this church March 20th, 2022. And prior to that, though, my wife had been inviting this guy to come to church. I want to have Irene come on up here. So Irene, you were inviting Aaron to church, right? Tell us about how you invited Aaron to come to church.
Well, Aaron was my boss, and I was inviting everyone at my office to come to church, and I was like, well, I gotta invite my boss too. But I was so scared to invite him that I gave him one of the invite cards, and I waited till he left his office, and then I went in his office and dropped off the invite card on his desk. And but yeah, because I was so scared. But anyway, he didn't show up, but I didn't give up, so I was like, I'm gonna invite him again. And then sure enough, he came, and then the following week he was volunteering in our worship band. So.
Yeah, just like that. So you were scared to invite Aaron, but you invited Aaron, and now Aaron, he plays every Sunday on our worship team, except for today. He's not here today. But Aaron started coming to church, and then Aaron invited Jenny. And so he was reaching out to Jenny. He invited Jenny to come to church, and she started coming to church. Jenny since has moved away. But while Jenny was here, she came across Esther. Esther, come on up here. And she invited Esther to come to church. So Esther, tell us about how Jenny was inviting you to show up here at Journey.
Well, Jenny had been telling me about you all for quite some time, even when you were at a different location.
Took a while, okay, yeah.
It took me a while. And then, connection with my daughter, she said, I need to find a church that I can connect with. And so I talked to Jenny about it some more, and so that's how we started coming here.
Yeah, and then from that, though, you started inviting someone to come, Veronica,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Veronica, come on up here. Yeah. So tell us about how that happened.
Well, Veronica is my goddaughter, and so I knew she was looking for a place to connect as well. But not only that, she's got an amazing talent, and so I thought this would be a perfect place for her, and I love it when she's here.
Yeah, so you were inviting Veronica. Veronica, she was inviting you. What'd you think?
I mean,
Yeah.
But coming here, finding, for lack of better words, like a church family was really important, and it did happen. So I'm just, yeah.
So you showed up, you got involved, we learned you could sing, and we said, great, you're going to sing all the time now. And so, but you also worked somewhere else, and you invited your coworker to show up, right? Caitlin, come on up here.
Caitlin.
So you invited Caitlin to come, and tell us about that.
Caitlin's awesome. We had so many awesome conversations, and we also confided in each other for the situations we were both going through. And man, I mean, I think you brought it up maybe 2-3 times that you were looking for like something, and I mentioned that I was on the worship team and I was singing, and I was like, I don't want to scare you away. Even after she had come here, maybe even 2 times, I was like, I don't want to scare you away. Like, but no pressure, but you know.
Right.
And yeah.
But you heard her, she was saying she was looking for something.
Right.
And so you heard that, and you said something to her about it. Yeah, I like it. And then Caitlin, you ended up inviting Ashley to come to church, right?
Yes, I did. After I first started coming here, everything was just like, whoa. And I knew Ashley was going through some stuff too, and she was over at my house, and I said, hey, listen to the sermon that changed everything for me, which was Mary's song.
Yeah.
And we just sat there, we would cry, we would pause, we would talk, we would play it again, cry, laugh, pause, like the revelation, and then she started coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So what happened then was, Irene, you were scared to invite your boss to come, so you just put an invite card on his desk, and eventually he ended up showing up. And then he was inviting Jenny, and she showed up. And Jenny was talking to you, Esther, for a long time about showing up. She didn't give up on you, but then when your daughter wanted to find a church, you said, well, come on, let's come to this church. And then you knew that Veronica was looking for something, so you shared an invite for her to come. And then, Veronica, you're working with Kate. And then you hear her talking about she's looking for something, so you say, why don't you show up? And you invited her to come, and then Caitlin, you knew that Ashley was going through some stuff, and so you said, here's what helped me out, let's talk through this. And then she started coming to church, and then you guys got to see Caitlin and Ashley get baptized, and none of that would have ever happened if Irene didn't extend the first invite to her boss. Do you see the chain there? Do you see how one invite led to another invite, led to another invite, led to another invite? The reason why you're here is because most likely somebody invited you. Maybe you saw a road sign and showed up. Maybe you got a mailer, whatever it was, but those were invitations for you to show up. But it never would have happened if that first invite didn't happen. So let me ask you, who do you need to invite next week for Easter? Who needs to be here because you say, come and see, come and sit with me. I want to show you what I'm experiencing in my life. I want to show you what God is showing me. Come and see. Who needs to be here? All it starts with is one invite. And who knows how many lives will be impacted because you just said, come and see. Now give it up one more time for these ladies here on stage. And I want to encourage you, if somebody doesn't show up, don't give up. Keep inviting. Next week, we have a chance to see people meet Jesus and journey with him. But you got to bring them. You know some good news now. And if you keep it to yourself, this isn't right, man. This is not right. We got to share this good news. So let's spread the word.